Hello and welcome everyone to the main event today. I'm Meeta and I'm so pleased to be joined by our special guest, returning special guest actually, Flo Weber-Zuanigh. Hi Flo, how are you doing today?
Hi, Mita. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
It's really good to have you back, Flo. You are such an expert. You've got your consultancy diversity in the boardroom. And specifically, I know that neurodiversity is a subject, that you're very passionate about. Tell me why you think today's subject is so important.
I think it's always about navigating, relationships the best we can, whether it's in the workplace or otherwise. And this is quite an important pillar of diversity and of differences that might be a bit less tangible than other things, such as, sexual orientation or skin color. And I think it's definitely an important one.
I so agree with you. I think it's, they talk about invisible disabilities. This, I think, is an invisible ability. I think that neurodiversity is a superpower that we haven't tapped into. And I think the larger organizations definitely have, access and funding, but this is something that every organization should be able to embrace into their day-to-day working world and supporting their people. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Just to do a little bit of housekeeping for everyone joining the room. Hello and welcome everyone as you're settling into today's session. Flo and I welcome you, and the next 45 minutes is going to be very much for you. It's what you want from today's session. So we sent out a link to offer everyone the chance to send some questions in advance. We've got a few of those to go through, but we also have a chat box here, which is really easy to navigate. And I'm just literally going to do a quick hello there to show you how easy it is. So if you have any comments or questions or anything that you want to get out there today, please put it on there. Flo and I are both available in this session, of course, but also outside of the session. We're both very active on LinkedIn, and we can also talk to you privately if this public space isn't an environment that you are comfortable in sharing. So the last thing I'd love for everyone to do, and I can see some of you have already started, is to get over to our poll today and let us know what it is that you're curious about when it comes to neurodiversity. Are you thinking about your own personal journey? I mean, I know that starting to look into neurodiversity in the workplace made me realize I was looking at it for my children. And actually now the more I know and the more I understand, I question whether I have some form of neurodiversity. In fact, Flo, there was a statistic saying that something like 25 to 30% of CEOs and directors have neurodiversity and aren't even aware of it yet.
Yeah, actually, so many successful people altogether have some form of neurodivergence. So I think this is something that can give solace to a lot of people once, you have a name to it or a diagnosis, looking up the successful people who, still manage to navigate the system and make it work for them.
Yeah, and actually work to their strengths, which allows them to focus on what they're good at. So that's the first option. The next option is about being a better ally. So how would you describe that, Flo? What would we mean by being an ally?
Especially in the workplace, if you're not aware of some of the big neurodivergence and how it can manifest in a working environment, you might create situations that can lead to conflict or just not be comfortable for some of your colleagues.
Yeah.
So just learning those kind of basics and very quick, simple tricks to help means that you're going to be able to show up much more authentically and be so helpful for your neurodivergent colleagues.
Indeed. I mean, straight away, the first thing we said is we want to break down myths and misconceptions. So that's going to help everyone to be a better ally. And then, of course, there's the business organizational side of it, which is, well, what are the legal ramifications? Is that something that you want to understand? What are the legal ramifications in your organization? That's another option. And then supporting your employees. So if you're a people leader or a business owner or somebody that's responsible for the talent pool of your organization, how can you support them? Are you creating an environment that means they feel comfortable coming forward? So that's something as well that we're going to talk about today. And then the most popular one so far, understanding options for reasonable adjustments. And we've actually said that that's one of our 3 areas that we want to cover today because it is so important. And we've got an other here. We've got a few people here who put other. Please could you share, if you are comfortable to do so, what that other is for you? It will allow us to hopefully answer questions and focus results and responses to helping everyone in the room today. And then the final area that we wanted to cover today was around, now I'm actually trying something about, but not printing. So I'm doing everything without printing paper today. So I'm looking on my phone. We wanted to talk about strategies for creating inclusive work environments where everyone can thrive. And I think that's the overarching, impact that we want our session today to have. So Flo, where would we start?
I guess probably with the semantic of it all.
Okay. Well, can we start? Yeah, can we start talking about what neurodiversity is and what types we're talking about? Because again, I think we all think we know, but let's just get that clear and understood. I think that would be a great start.
Yes, exactly. So neurodiversity is the diverse aspect of it. So it includes neurodivergent people, who would be the one that would have conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia. And depending on the people, the neurodivergent umbrella includes more. For example, some people who have bipolar disorder consider themselves to be divergent. There's really like a wide variety of conditions within that umbrella. And then what is called neurotypical, which would be the kind of normal or expected functioning of the brain and nervous system. So this is all based on how our brains and nervous system work. This is kind of like the main differences on the neurotypical versus neurodivergent, and all together, you've got a neurodiverse workforce.
Yeah. And, you were saying that it's a difficult one to identify, one, because sometimes people don't even realize they have it themselves, but also because for those that do, might almost be afraid to bring it up and talk to their employers about it.
Yes, exactly. It's something that's very personal and that can be linked for some people to a lot of trauma of, being maybe not diagnosed early enough or some painful experiences. So it's a very tricky one to navigate.
Yeah. And we also have some further information from Boardroom about the other option, which is about emerging trends. So wanting to understand what emerging trends there are in technology and innovation that would support neurodivergent individuals. Because again, I'm really up on my statistics because we're doing today's session, but apparently somebody with autism has a 43% larger capacity to process information. I mean, talk about a supercomputer in there, for employers, I bet they're not, and something only 7% of people with autism who can be employed are employed. I mean, that the abilities versus the statistics of employment are so big. I think technology has got to be the answer in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of barriers because there is a lot of many organizations really focus on the legal aspects. So, for example, when it comes to hiring, many organizations will just have the mention that they are, an equal employer and that you have to ask if you need any kind of adjustment for the hiring process. So that already from the get-go, that kind of puts a barrier to it because it means that you have to come out saying, hey, neurodivergent here. And that's the thing that can already be tricky, rather than if you go ahead and be like, we share the questions ahead of interviews. There is like a 15-minute window to join the interview. That's fine if you're 5 or 10 minutes late. We won't judge you. So those are kind of like the big differences. Like we need to move away from that legal framework and be like, how can we truly be inclusive?
Yeah, not just a plan or a policy on paper, but what it means in practical terms. Because so much about neurodivergence, again, just from learning and understanding from an employer perspective, from, in fact, I was speaking to one of my team today, Flo, that about 10 years ago, we had an employee with undiagnosed but suspected adult ADHD. And the challenge for both parties was that they weren't really sure. They hadn't had it diagnosed. And that even 5 years ago, I don't think there was as much awareness and understanding, but there's so much out there now. And you don't know what you don't know. So to be in the room today, everyone here is embracing, making sure that they can support neurodivergent people or get the best out of their own abilities. But what would you say has been the big shift in the last, and when would you say the shift happened? Because as I said, 10 years ago, even pre-COVID, there was some awareness, but far less than now.
I think the social media played a big part in it.
Yeah.
In terms of raising the awareness, and also research. For example, for ADHD, the first time that people with uterus were the subject of a research on ADHD, it was 2017. Before that, ADHD was only researched on, little hyperactive boys, which created that kind of misconception about how ADHD actually shows up.
Yeah.
So there's the kind of research catching up as well as the collective awareness.
Yeah. And just the acceptance and the openness, I think, is such a powerful, I call it the beginning. This isn't the beginning, but the stage that we're at the moment. And if we can make this, the best time was back then, but the next best time is now. And if we embrace ensuring we get this right going forward, there'll just be so many benefits of, more support for them, but also more output, more engagement, more retention, more loyalty, wider talent pools. I mean, it's endless, isn't it, the benefits?
And it's really about that, the benefits, and not seeing it as an issue or a challenge, but this is just really about knowing more about yourself and about others around you. Even it's the case as well for neurotypical people. Someone might prefer to have a quick chat on the phone rather than to talk per email. It's the same for everyone. We all have our own little things and our little quirks. So it's just, neurodiversity and neurodivergence is part of that.
Yeah, indeed. So I have another question from the room today from Stephanie, who says that her question around what she's joined us for today is to understand that when sharing interview questions with candidates, what if we haven't decided to share them until the last minute, i.e. business pressures rather than, planning, everything is, best laid plans, but they weren't shared. What can be the impact of that? How would somebody deal with that?
So someone, for example, who is autistic might struggle a bit more with things that are not, where there is no clear structure to it, or that they're not able to prepare ahead of time. But if you can share the exact list of questions, that can still be, a more detailed breakdown of how it's going to go.
Yeah.
For example, for, 15 minutes, we want to hear about your experience. Then for the following 10 minutes, we are going to talk to you about, our clients or our mission. And we want to hear your thoughts about it. So this is still something that someone could prepare looking at your website, for example. It doesn't have to be the exact questions. Obviously, that's ideal. But even if it's the broad area or how you want to structure the interview, how many people are going to be in the room, be very crystal clear about the expectations and crystal clear with the language that you're using. Yeah,
no surprises.
Exactly.
And I think that one of the, as an employer, when interviewees are being put through the system, just for any employer, regardless of whether we're talking neurodiversity or neurotypical people, we want consistency in the process, because that's how you can then compare and measure. And would you say, Flo, that there can be two different flows within this environment then? So would there be a neurodivergent approach, and would there be a neurotypical approach for the same job?
Personally, I think that it should be one more consistent approach.
Yeah.
Because this is the same issue once people get into the workplace. If you don't already have something in place that is inclusive and that people have to come and ask for their needs to be met, this is where it's actually going to create like those two different ways of feeling. You might have neurotypical employees that are very comfortable and very happy within the organization, and then neurodivergent ones that actually feel slightly awkward, don't really know how to get their needs met. Because to your point earlier, Meeta, about someone who wasn't diagnosed, unless you've been diagnosed in childhood and have a very clear understanding of your needs, a lot of people don't really know what they need. And there's already so many tools that people use. For example, if you're using Teams, there's the transcript function for the calls that can be, exactly. It's so helpful, and it's something you've already got. You don't have to pay extra on top. This is already there. And there are so many functions like that. Or Google Doc does voice to text. So if you need to, send an email with instructions after having had a catch up and already explained, you don't even have to type it again. There's a lot of assistive tech or even, easy things to be done in the actual workspace that don't cost more, and at least everybody can access it from the get-go.
Yeah, I think I mean, one of the questions is around tech, and I'd love to cover more of that starting right from the start, i.e. recruitment and how we can bring tech into that process. But then also, as you said, there's so much access, but are the conversations happening? Are people being made aware of what support there is? And I'd be really interested if anyone is in the room, as you've just mentioned, Teams and Google Doc, if anyone else in the room is aware of tech that they use and they feel is really useful, please share it on the chat box. I think that will be so powerful and helpful for everyone in the room today, or whoever's watching it afterwards, and we'll make sure we share that. So in terms of supporting people with neurodivergency, one of the areas I know that has been very difficult for them is this coming back to work after being made to work from home, or everyone working from home because of lockdown. A lot of people with neurodiversity have challenges with concentration, distractibility, and again, if they're not aware of it, but they're really reticent to go back to the office, there could be something in there. How would you approach something like that?
This is something that can be both, systemic and individual. I know a lot of organizations have that broad approach of mandatory presence in the office, certain amount of days a week or a month. But this is something that can be very challenging for some individuals who might have been absolutely thriving working from home. So this is something that can be a bit more, this is where flexible working is incredibly helpful. And I think we have to go back to why do we want people all in the same space together? I know there's very often what organizations say, oh, it's about our culture, it's about that, but then what is that element, and why can't that element necessarily survive when you have to work with a screen? So it's really about kind of going back to those basics and be like, why do we need that? And how can we make sure that it works for everyone? And asking the question back to your employees as well. Not to know what the majority wants, but really to see all of the answers.
Get to the core of each individual. Now, that's something that has been a shift anyway, post-COVID. We are, as business leaders, as people managers, becoming more holistic, understanding not just the employee as somebody providing outcomes from a job, but who they are as an individual, who they are as a family person, what makes them up as a whole. Because if we can understand the whole, we can support all areas. So actually, good managers should already have the structure to ask the right questions. But if we were going to look at reasonable adjustments and a system by which to approach this, where would somebody start?
I think start with the very basics. So again, most neurodiversity in general and neurodivergence, it's really about how your brain works and your nervous system. So if you think about the nervous system, you can have a look at the different senses. So for example, what's the light like in the office? Is it, those bright lights that blind half of your employees? And think about all of those different things. Like, is there an office that's going to be next to, I don't know, a kitchen or something, and where the smells might be a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And some companies that have, the space to do it, such as Google, they have libraries kind of space
Yeah.
where, like it's the light is a bit more dim. People who come in don't actually speak, or you have to whisper. So you can have like actual physical space that are like that, or make sure that you can provide, like noise cancelling headsets, or something as simple as, like red, yellow, green color codes on people's screens. Like, if you can't come talk to them, if they've put, like their red sticker on, it means that they want to be alone and undisturbed.
Yeah.
There's really a lot of things that don't take a lot of budgets. And I think that's kind of the perception when it comes to diversity, that you need to invest like a lot of money before you can have something inclusive, and it's really not.
So as always, with the balance, 80% of challenges could probably be solved by only spending 20% of the budget if you actually think about what that red, yellow, green. That's brilliant. I always, I think people also working remotely, there's become a new form of presenteeism where people feel they also always have to be on. And, and I think that there's, again, to support each other. And this isn't for just neurodivergent people, it's actually for everyone with their style of working, is finding a way. And that's why I like what you said, that there shouldn't be two ways. It should be one way that works for everyone, which understands that, everyone's an individual and needs support in different ways. Flo, I looked up the top 10 ways neurodiverse employees are affected at work, and I wanted to just run through these with you to see if we've covered what you would consider looking at when making reasonable adjustments. So the first one I think we've already touched on, the inability to concentrate. The next one was how people sit, so they're unable to sit still for a long time, or they feel uncomfortable. They find it difficult to meet deadlines or finish tasks. You mentioned about an interview time for somebody who's neurodivergent, giving them a window as opposed to a specific time. Or the other way around, becoming so hyper-focused on a task or work that they miss prioritization. But actually, you get both people that are super creative and think outside the box. My daughter's dyslexic, and the way she brings solutions, it blows my mind. I'm like, whoa, I never looked at it that way. And creating an environment where people feel free to be able to voice their thoughts. And on the other side, we get people that are also good at problem solving and coming up with solutions. But then you also get people that perhaps can't be creative, can't necessarily read and write with the same speed or effectiveness, can't show empathy, can't show emotion. There's all of that. And also don't really want to speak publicly, again. So is that a good range? Is there anything else that might be worth considering?
No, I think that already covers a lot of ground. And again, there's loads of very quick tweaks that can help solve a lot of those. For example, again, it's about the system versus the individual needs. But if your organization has an inclusive system in place, then it's easier to have people raise their hand and be like, oh, actually, that doesn't quite work for me. Yeah. Something that works really well for like meeting deadlines and the focus is called body doubling.
Okay.
You can do it remotely. You can do it in person. You just agree on a time, like let's body double for 1 hour. And you can be on a Teams or a Zoom chat with someone and be like, this is what I want to get done. The other person tells you what they want to get done in that hour. Okay. And then you both mute yourselves. You don't have to chat. If you want, you can even turn your camera off. Yeah. And at the end of that time, you then just be like, oh yeah, that's what I've done. And it's absolutely fantastic. I usually try to set it up in teams that have things like, monthly deadlines, etc. So the whole team does a body double together before like a big deadline or things like that. And again, it can be something that's quite systemic. It doesn't have to be implemented for one person in particular. This is something that also helps neurotypical people.
That's interesting. And is that to do with time management and prioritization? How does that help? How does that help them?
Yeah, it feels a bit weird because usually when I suggest body doubling, everybody's like, yeah, But there is something that happens when you actually do it. I'm not sure if it's like knowing that the other person is being productive on the other end, or that, there is like a very clear timeline to it. But it just works. I mean, if you want to do something like that just for yourself, the Pomodoro method is quite nice as well. So there's like nice Pomodoro timers online. You say what you want to do in the next 25 minutes, and then you get a 5-minute break, or like a 5-minute treat, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there's lots of, quick tricks like that can be really helpful. Or we were talking earlier about the structure and surprise for people with autism. If every meeting invite has the 3 Ps, purpose, process, payoff, that's already a lot of the surprise out of the window. And all of those are small things that don't cost much and that don't take a lot of time either.
Yeah. And Louise mentioned that it helps her to not procrastinate. And as I said, I think understanding more and more, I definitely have some, I think probably would be ADHD types of behaviors that I know, prioritization and timekeeping. I always used to think I was just so enthusiastic about what I was talking about that I lost track of time, but now I understand that it may be the way I'm wired. And so, I set alarms on my phone now for whenever I'm 5 minutes before the end of something. So you do find tools, but it's being creative, isn't it? And it's realizing that we all need different support in different ways, and there's no right or wrong. Let's try things. And I think in a team, in an organization, it again, an open conversation to say, this involves everyone, whether you're neurodiverse, neurotypical. Let's talk about what are your strengths and challenges, what you think you're good at, what you find harder, and let's try and find some solutions. And most of them, as you said, Flo, may be really not costly at all, but just mindful and aware, creating that awareness.
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating how everyone is straight up getting a bit worried about our budget for to make sure that we have a diverse workforce, the budget to make sure that we can have someone that technically has that invisible disability, but it's actually more about, as you said, creative thinking than anything else.
Indeed. Now we've got one comment from Huram about tech that is valuable and useful. So this one is reciteme.com. I was just going to look it up yet, but it sounds like that might be some sort of ability to speak and get it all written down and almost again not have to type or go back. And I mean, I look at my written notes and I can't see them, can't work them out, but I very much put everything into my notes, or I do a straight away post a meeting, I do a little voiceover of everything that happened, and that gets typed up. So Recite Me, for everyone out there, that might be one to have a look at as well. Thank you, Huram. So Flo, reasonable adjustments. We've talked about, the fact that they don't have to be convoluted or expensive. They can be very simple. What would you say are the top 3 adjustments that employers are making that have good, strong impact?
When it comes to time management and I'd say noise management, tend to be the biggest one. Because noise, especially in today's offices that are 99% open space, this is definitely one that can trigger someone and be very challenging to manage. And this, as well as time management, in the sense that now that the flexible working gets more and more in place, someone that might be triggered by busy spaces, they're able to start work earlier, or actually like start later but finish later as well when the office is a bit empty, or at least when they get less onslaughts of pinging emails and chat notifications. So those tend to be the two that are the most common. But you did mention people that might struggle to stay seated. There's actually specific cushions that basically move a bit. So if you're struggling in terms of being a bit hyperactive, it's something that can help you stay seated for a bit longer. Or, some companies can do movement breaks that can help everyone. Actually, it helps everyone to be more productive. Or, standing desks, things like that. again, like the possibilities are quite endless.
That's fantastic. I mean, everyone remembers the fidget spinners that were initially very popular, I think, in lockdown, but were they actually a tool or a toy for people with ADHD? Is that right? Was it the background in neurodiversity?
That's a very good question. This is also something that's becoming more and more popular. Like some people now, when they do like conferences for their company, have some available on the tables. And this is an example of how to be inclusive without having to be like, do you have autism? Do you have ADHD? And just being like, we've got fidget toys, whoever needs them right now, have at them.
Yeah, I love that, because I think, again, diagnosed, neurotypical, or just on your journey, everyone will need something that gives them a better experience and a better outcome of that meeting or that day. We had some questions that came in, and I think this one in particular is really an important one, because it's about communication. How would somebody start a conversation about neurodiversity without being offensive? You know, and what can people ask their colleagues? Like I'd love to talk a little bit about communicating with people around neurodivergence in a workplace.
Yes, so I guess there's kind of two buckets. One is you just want to talk about neurodiversity in general.
Yeah.
And then I guess it would be about what's your end goal. Is it that you want to open up the communication in your organization? Is it that you want to share something personal? Like, what is really like the goal of talking about it? And then you can figure out a way and ideally make sure that your employees are able to talk as well.
Yeah. And so much of it starts with training managers, right? Training the leadership, training the managers. One of our training courses that we offer is around understanding neurodiversity. We do one across diversity, but specifically understanding neurodiversity and how to harness it as a superpower for your people. Because it's not just the people that are neurodiverse that will appreciate and benefit. I think everyone, when they see that all members of their of the team, whatever diversity or protected characteristic that might be, it has a voice, is supported, is seeked to be understood, and therefore feels that they have a belonging in the organization. I think that is that's the outcome, right, that we're all trying to get to.
Yeah, exactly. The belonging is definitely the golden nugget at the end.
Yeah.
And to the other part of that question around how to talk to colleagues about it, again, it depends about what's the point at the end. If this is like the colleague you're the closest to, and that you go have drinks together, and like you're quite close, and that this is to talk to them about what it's like for them, then you could ask, would you be open to talk about that, or is that okay if I ask you a question about that? But it's only if you're close friends, because again, it remains something that's a condition. Not everyone sees it like that, but this is a condition. I wouldn't go ask about a stranger on the street about, oh, how did you get that scar? Could you tell me about your medical history? So I think this is the element. Or if you want to talk to a colleague because you want to understand how to best work together, that discussion does not have to include neurodiversity. You can just be like, oh, what works best for you? I tend to prefer having meetings in the afternoons because in the morning I'm more focused. Or, it doesn't have to always include that. It again depends about what's the aim of that particular communication.
Yeah, well, that's quite interesting. You mentioned that, because my question was going to be, if a manager suspects that one of their members is struggling because of neurodivergence, how would they approach that? But you've just answered that. They don't have to approach it from a neurodivergence perspective. They approach it from, hey, one of my members of my team, I noticed that, whether it's engagement or, excuse the fire alarm, I'm going to shut my door. Hold on. Hopefully I won't have to vacate. So one of the, can you hear me all right, by the way? Okay, it stopped. Yeah. That's good. Sorry, everyone. That's unexpected. Talk about no surprises. So if a manager was sitting with one of their team and noticed that there were challenges, let's just talk openly, ask the questions, and you can also do surveys that can be anonymized with questions. What sort of questions, if an organization wanted to get a feel for neurodivergence or supporting neurodiversity, what sort of questions could they put out there?
You could have questions around what they find the most challenging, and they could put, like some sample of answers, like I don't know, timekeeping, meeting deadlines, like and then something specific to the office space, like do you struggle with having lots of people around, or like the noise or things like that. Again, if you do something like that, it's obviously best that it's anonymized, because otherwise it's really it's a bit like a witch hunt for the neurodivergent employees.
Understood.
It gives a good idea.
Yeah, and also, how confident do you feel that you can approach your manager about a conversation around this? Seeing how open and communicative the organisation is seen to be. That also is an important understanding to gauge, because you may have all the policies, all the bells, whistles, toys, and tech in place, but people may not feel comfortable stepping up and saying, "Hey, I need some help."
Yeah, exactly. And there's still a lot of managers that would be like, "Oh, that person is late every day," for example. And yes, maybe it's like something completely different, but the fact that someone doesn't have a diagnosis doesn't mean that they're not neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously things such as autism and ADHD really impact executive functioning. So yeah, the facts of being on time or not, for example. So I think it's really defaulting to curiosity rather than judgment.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I noticed that person is late a lot. And then maybe asking, how can we support you? Rather than you're late a lot, that can't happen anymore. It's really about trying to do that switch towards curiosity.
I love that. That for me is the takeaway for this: switch and default to curiosity rather than judgment and assumptions, right? Because again, we read up on it, we know somebody who's neurodivergent, and all of a sudden there's a tendency to think, well, I understand this, but everyone is so unique in this that, no two solutions are the same. And that again goes for all members of the team, all challenges, all diversity, and protected characteristics. Everyone needs that individual touch. Flo, we've got a few more minutes left, and there's one area that I want to discuss with you around high pressure environments. Neurodivergence is, again, I'm talking about it as a superpower. But can there be disadvantages of neurodivergence in high pressure environments?
I think it's the same thing for neurotypical people as well.
Okay.
You're going to have people that might be more stressed than others, some people that are going to get more prone to burnout than others, or more overwhelmed than others. Again, this is really about that curiosity and getting to understand what works for people. So this is something that you can ask as well, when you're going through interview, like, when do you do your best work? But yeah, if your environment is like a high pressure environment all of the time, every day of the year, then maybe the issue is not the neurodivergent employees.
Yeah.
So this is something to question as well.
Yeah. Well, Louise has a comment here about the fact that what we should be doing is educating people and quashing that whole, well, everyone's on the spectrum. Isn't everyone on the spectrum? Or like I even mentioned, am I undiagnosed? I think that it needs to be something that we become so comfortable with, the language, the understanding of people. And as you said, not necessarily labeling people with neurodivergence, but actually saying, how can we support and help each other be the best that we can be and the happiest we can be? Because they go hand in hand. Success and productivity, success and happiness, they go hand in hand.
And it's again that's assumption. Like, if someone was telling you, oh, my favorite color is I don't know, purple, you wouldn't go back. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Like I know myself. I
Yeah.
know my favorite color is that. And it's the same thing when it comes to like a neurodivergence. This is something that people have had their whole entire life. They've got plenty of examples. The hoops you've got to jump through to get to a point where either you have a diagnosis or you come to terms with the fact that this is who you are. It's if someone, like is open enough to share that, like the follow-up question should never ever be questioning the validity of that. Or yeah, as per Louis' example, I must have ADHD too, then.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
That
And also the answer to I must have it too is like maybe you do. Maybe you do, because it's actually undiagnosed a lot. So.
Yeah. I hear you. So one area that we haven't covered too much, and I'd love to tie everything up with on this, is about the legal ramifications in organizations. What would they be? What would that look like?
So this is something that can be a bit of a gray area, actually. Like when you're an employee and that you're looking to understand what should be available to you, you find those terms of reasonable adjustment. What the hell is a reasonable adjustment as opposed to an unreasonable one? And this is again going back to how do you want your organization to show up when it comes to those topics? Do you really want to get the best out of your people? Do you want to be like the blueprint for diversity in your field? What's the long-term vision for diversity within your organization?
Yeah.
And if there is none, that's usually when the default is going to be what's the bare minimum legal requirements that we need to do. So this is really important to like go back to what's the vision for the organization. There are some lawyers that have that as a specialty, like what reasonable adjustments and having those discussions with neurodivergent employee.
Yeah.
But again, if you have to default to that, it's probably that there's been a lot happening before that was less than suboptimal.
Yeah, the communication lines were not there in the way that they should be to support everyone anyway.
Exactly.
So if someone's come along today and thinking, how do I support my neurodivergent team or people, actually the question is, how do I support my people? And creating an environment and a process that brings in the questions around everyone and everything. And I mean, that I hadn't come into this session looking at it that way, Flo, and you've really helped to open my perspective on that. We've got, we've talked about some of the tech. We've got some suggestions from the group. I mean, if anybody was thinking that, I've got members of my team at the moment that definitely need that support and maybe want to work from home more, want to be on Zoom or Teams more, are using the transcribing approach. How else could we support them? So we've thought about the tech, we've had the conversations, and I'm thinking a lot around knowing yourself. We do a lot around personality profiling and, what are people's value system? What is people competencies? But what would be, again, not necessarily just for neurodivergent people, but what would be a good approach to helping people support their employees better, to be better allies? Like what sort of understanding would an organization do well to put in place?
I think it goes a lot to the line manager, but because obviously a line manager is the one that's going to work closely with someone else, and making sure that they're trained and they have like that basic understanding and curiosity that can help them, bring up things with their direct report. Like, for example, I noticed that a few challenges you've had lately were around your memory. Maybe we could try this or that. It's really, again, in the curiosity rather than, I noticed you're struggling with your memory. Do you have ADHD?
Yeah.
It's, again, really, I think empowering the line managers with the knowledge is quite key.
Yeah, very much so. And that is all around education, training, awareness. And if that's something that you feel is lacking, there's so much online. We can help you with that. But take that step, I would say. We, Flo and I have just sort of skim the surface today, but I would love to be able to do more sessions like this with you, Flo. And I know that you go into organizations and do your own audits and support process as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got also like a workshop together, which is lead like an ally. And it's really about that, like making sure that line managers are able to go to that default of curiosity and are able to support everyone.
Yeah. Which encompasses people with neurodiversity or not. Wonderful. Well, be curious rather than judgmental is going to be my closing comment from what I've taken for today. Quite interestingly, the poll's highest scorer was supporting your employees. That's the biggest area of curiosity today. The second, understanding options for reasonable adjustments, legal ramifications, and then personal life, being a better ally, and other around tech was the least, but still probably a third of the room. So added together, so a great range of why people have come along today, and we hope that you've been able to take something that you can apply straight away. We will be doing a recording of this session. Well, this will be recorded and sent out to everyone that's signed up, but please feel free to share this with colleagues, managers, anyone that you think would would benefit from looking at neurodiversity support and general supporting your people to give them the best outcomes, success and happiness. Flo, how about you? I've taken your line about curiosity over judgment, but what would you say, anyone that's in the room today or watching this afterwards, what would you say is an important closing comment?
Probably, again, going back to your vision of diversity as a whole and as an organization, because there's nothing that can really happen or make sense. Like, you can't have a D&I strategy if you don't know where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to vision.
Map it out and make it available and aware for all. Fantastic. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Flo, for being our special guest and having so much knowledge and expertise. Thank you to everyone who's signed up and attended today or who's watching this afterwards. Take what you can from this, apply it, share it with people that you know can also create that benefit for their workforce, and let's make that difference one webinar at a time. I'm going to say bye for now, and I'm going to say thank you all. All the best. Have great days, everyone.